Hello, and welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, powered by Analyst Investors. I'm your host, David Olivencia, co-founder of Analyst Investors, and a passionate advocate for leveraging innovation and technology to drive success. Let's get started. This is Exponential Growth. I also want to give gratitude to Salvi Media. They're the founding sponsor of the podcast. They're a premier executive content agency dedicated to crafting exceptional content and strategies that elevate companies' brands and their executives. They're creators of the Emmy Award-winning CEO series. I think many of you have seen that. We've also featured one of my portfolio companies, Analyst Investors and Hallow, on their CEO series. And they've had in-depth interviews with CEOs talking about their personal journeys and business experience. The CEO series can be found on Cheddar, Entrepreneur Magazine, Reach TV, and really want to thank Salvi Media for their support of the podcast. You can also follow them on social media, as well as they have a podcast studio in Chicago. Join them as well. So again, thank you, Salvi Media, for making this podcast possible.
We're live with a special Exponential Growth podcast with a dear friend, a partner at CXO Partners, which is really an elite, fractional CXO organization. It's the CEO of Scient One, doing digital strategy, product innovation for some of the top companies out there. He's also a former senior executive at companies like Microsoft, E&Y, Globant, and others, and a proud limited partner in my fund. But in addition to that, he's got a very strong competency, and he actually did this social media post, I think, Alex, it was maybe 2 weeks ago or so, on kind of Elon Musk and all of the different companies he has, and kind of a little bit of the secret behind it. I said, this is amazing and very insightful. I said, we got to jump on and really talk about this. And I provide a lot of the guests, members, and others just an insights to what we're calling Unveiling the Hidden Threads of Elon Musk's $1 trillion empire. So I want to welcome to the podcast Alex Mainetto. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, David. Thank you for the invite, and great to be here as usual with you. And thank you to all your listeners and anybody tuning in.
All right, great. So maybe let's talk about, something gave you the thoughts to put out that post, which I thought was just very insightful. It was really the trigger behind this. And after this podcast, we'll put the post in the link so you could dig deeper in it. But what stimulated you to write that, and maybe just give our listeners a little bit of what it explains, then we're going to dive deeper.
Yeah, so three things that really stimulated the sort of article that I put out there. One was our initial podcast that you and I had when we started talking about brain-computer interfaces. The second thing has been an investment in a company that I think many of the members of Analyst Investors and the fund have been looking at, which is around companies like Neurable and others that are in that sort of AI space. And then that's sort of it's probably the second reason. But the last one is that I finally finished reading Musk's biography and his book, and it's really fascinating. Whether you like him or not, it's probably, or whether you want to take different sides. That's not probably the thing, but it really, the book sort of finished inspiring me to really talk about what is possible. And I think that there is this dose of reality versus hype, of what could be possible versus what is real right now today. But then the second message that I wanted to send through that article was the topic of convergence, which is so important, not only for Musk, but I wanted to also make the point here that convergence is possible for many, many, many companies. Probably just to name a couple, Apple and Amazon, also sitting on a number of possible things that they could be doing. But right now, nobody has really pulled the trigger on any of that. And there's a ton of opportunities waiting to happen.
Yeah, no, and Google's another, Alphabet is another one, right? And there's others out there. On the Elon Musk in the book, I've read lots of books. It was a great book, and and I totally agree with you, right? Say what you want about him, but this is probably one of the top entrepreneurs, value creators, right? In the history of enterprises. So there's something you can study and learn from him, right? And there's a lot in there. I highly recommend the book if you have not read it. And then so explain. So just at a high level, explain what the post was about, because like, at least I read the book and I know, like, he's got all these different businesses, and I knew about them, and I knew individually what they're doing, and they're amazing, right? But like your post, when I read it, it was like, man, no, there's something deeper here, how these things are tied together. And if you're able to get all these things tied together, and there's going to be some really big things that are happening. And obviously he's thinking on a much, much different level. But when you put that post out, I was like, Alex sees something a little bit more. So explain to the listeners what you explained in the post.
Yeah, sure. So happy to do that. I think that to summarize it in a nutshell, the way that I see this is that there's a great upcoming opportunity to create, what I describe as the sort of a second nervous system for the planet. Or another way to think about it is kind of this tech stack for the planet. And the article takes us to sort of what is possible if we start thinking about the Musk properties not as isolated companies, but as sort of as a unified, tech ecosystem of kind of, members and limbs of a body, right? If you think, one analogy, that I usually like to make when it comes to this is, think of it as if it was the body, and then you have components of the Musk company that are the brain, components of the Musk companies are the spinal cord, and then components of the Musk companies are the limbs, and then as you put it all together, what you end up getting through synergy and convergence is this sort of exponential ecosystem of not 6 or 7 companies, but one unified operating system for humanity, basically.
While you were saying that, I kept thinking about the boring company. It must be like the intestines or something, right? but we'll put that one aside. No, but I like the way you're thinking about that. So maybe kind of let's just double click in it and say, okay, well, because then I think you broke it down. You talked about what he's doing, just what he's doing with the satellites and with X. So break down a couple of those components and how they fit in.
Yeah, and I have a great diagram, by the way, that I decided to put together after our first podcast, and I'm happy to share that with you, so then you can send that to your listeners. And I call it one operating system, infinite possibilities. But again, think of it as a backbone. So I think AI at the center, as the brain, is really the operating system that is really Grok and the XAI properties in general. And I think that you saw probably some recent news, that Musk has announced that now that's coming to Tesla vehicles. And so that reinforces this concept of, it's really the brain of the body is really Grok AI. When you think about
Tesla has been cranking on AI for a long time and getting that engine, those muscles and language models and all that stuff going, a long head start in that space.
Yeah, and if you, I think I wrote another article that is about the summer of LLMs, and with the recent release of Grok Heavy 4, which is really the only LLM that has multi-agent capability. They took a test, which is the ultimate, test for, it is kind of this test that tests the toughest problems in the earth, right? And I think it's the ultimate test of humanity, I think it's called. And Grok Heavy 4 was the only LLM that is multi-agent capable that was able to score about 49%. And when you think about it, is 49% is an amazingly high number in the age of where we are today. And so, probably the smartest person couldn't score past, 9-10% single digits. And now you have this thing that are already in its infancy, because really we are at the infancy of sort of these levels of intelligence. It's already scoring at 49%. Imagine in 2 to 3 years, imagine in 5 years. And so Grok at the center. I think Starlink is then the nervous system, in my opinion, right? Because that is the pipes, the bandwidth. You probably saw the news today. So Starlink. There's a possibility of sort of through SpaceX getting connected to EchoStar now, or there may be a possibility that they end up buying EchoStar. And these are all the
just
moves.
Explain to our users, they may not know what Starlink is or EchoStar, so just maybe lay out just quickly what Starlink is and EchoStar.
Yeah, so Starlink is the company that manages a lot of the satellite capability and all the companies that have sort of those satellite properties, which, by the way, the government uses a ton of that capability. The government is probably one of the biggest customers, if not the biggest customer for Starlink. And then EchoStar is a think of it as the traditional dish or EchoStar. So think of it this combination of a cable, broadband, and a telco company all in one that EchoStar had bought from the SEC many moons ago. A lot of bandwidth. And then by getting that bandwidth, then you get the right to use those frequencies, which are critical for the type of work that Starlink needs right now. And when you think about the possibilities of maybe whether it's Starlink or one of the other companies issuing a phone that is going to be Starlink based, now all of a sudden now you have all this bandwidth and things that you could be buying for very low price, frankly, and all of a sudden now you have a brand new product, right? Because that phone has been being talked about for a long time. That he's going to be releasing a competitor to Apple, or and it hasn't happened yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens soon.
Yeah, well, a couple things there. Yeah, I remember he was posting things like, hey, Apple and OpenAI, it has favoritism towards OpenAI, and they're putting them at the top of their. And I'm like, Elon, man, quit complaining. Just create your own damn phone, It's like, and who knows? Maybe that's gonna, you can complain, you can create your own damn phone. So we'll see. But it's a move in that direction, right? If that's what he wants to do, right?
Yeah, and so two more parts on to the body, I would say. So the limbs, in my opinion, you have the Tesla vehicles, the robo taxis, which are upcoming. These robots with Optimus. So all these are, sensors in the network. Think about these are, sensors at the edge, collecting data, sending data, learning about the world, right? We haven't even gotten started on, home robotics. You probably have more information about industry robotics, right? And industrial that's been around for a long time. But as soon as this Optimus line of robots enters the home, you're going to be now, learning so much more about the environment in general and all of that stuff. At one point, we're going to talk about what the real mode is for Tesla, and data is one of those things, right? That they're really after, and that they probably have more data than you could probably imagine, just on the Tesla company alone. And so those are the limbs, and think of those as sort of sensors that are touching the living surface. And then the last thing I would say is what we talked about the last time, which was Neuralink. And this is one of my favorite pieces because this is how we eventually get augmented, whether it's through Neuralink or some other competitor thing. But this is where we start, making connections on one is augmenting ourselves. In order to sort of keep up with AI eventually as we try to reach sort of general intelligence. But then the second thing that happens now is you have this technology that allows you to, no need for other interfaces but your thoughts, right? And so now you have all this data that is, generated by your brain, that connected into the other, properties. All of a sudden is this wealth of unlimited amount of data that God only knows what could be there. And as you compound that stuff with an AI organism, like Grok, and then you layer on top something like X, right? Because X has another potential to become really, if they do some things right, it could become, think of it kind of the remote control, if you will, for communications and aggregating a lot of this information into a way. I wouldn't be surprised if one day, X could be the way that you control your car, you control your robots, you control kind of your desktop in a way of communications and all the things that surround you. So that was kind of the basis for the article and the message there. But again, let's not forget that, I can't certainly predict when any of this is going to happen. This is possible. But one of the key important things here, again, is about convergence and the possibilities that we get if we are to do that, and what they could do if they really, move forward in this.
No, I love the analogy, because it's an easy way to wrap your arms around all of this. There's a couple points, on the humanoid robots side that he has in Tesla. I think at some point, he could spin it out. He could keep it, but just as its own thing. I did an article on this. By 2040, it's not that long from now, right? Life moves fast.
Oh, yeah.
It's like my grandma or my abuelita would used to say, time goes fly. I said, no, grandma, time goes fast. And so but 2040 is not a long time. And there's going to be more humanoid robots on the planet than humans. And it only goes, when I say it takes 9 months, to crank out a human, it takes 9 seconds probably to crank out these humanoid robots. So it's and what that means, and to your point around the data, right? And all the data that all these endpoints, everybody talked about the edge computing. I think the predictions were a lot. I remember hearing edge computing back, 5-10 years ago. And I was like, damn, that's a lot. And I think they're a little bit ahead of their time. But I think when you see all this coming, those things will be at the edge. And then with X, I think the other thing with X is it's also like, you have XAI, and that's kind of, call it historical intelligence and all that kind of stuff. I think what X gives you gives you like real time, like you're going to be able, because of what people are doing and the trends and all that kind of stuff, what I find is amazing. What you kind of didn't touch on, and maybe it's like, I don't know, out there, is SpaceX, which might call it the enabler of a lot of this stuff. Well, it's another thing too, though. Like actually, it may be tied. You got the human analogy, but I guess that human analogy is like on Earth, but you also kind of have it,
That's
in
right.
Mars and beyond, right? Or wherever, or interplanetary.
Yeah.
Right. And so you got SpaceX, which is they call it the engine that's launching those satellites, and those satellites get better, cheaper, faster. And the speeds at which you're going to get the data here, I guess you could have those satellites, or at least satellites orbiting around Mars as well for data and interconnectivity. What are your thoughts on SpaceX and how it fits into all of this?
Yeah, right now, this is kind of the next, get to the moon period of time, right? Like, who can get to colonize Mars first kind of wins. And a lot of governments are desperately trying to figure out who gets there first. I actually did write an article about this also as well. The problem today is that the technology is not there yet to sort of go and come back. So, a lot of the things that we need to do right now, there's a lot of scientists trying to break their heads and trying to figure out how do they deploy things that kind of build themselves, for example. Like, so for example, you deployed a unit, and that unit automatically builds itself or manufactures itself and replicates itself. So that way you could have a place that could be inhabited by the folks that sort of, land, and they already get to a place where there's a place to go. But the plan is not for them to come back, at least not.
It's a one-way ticket.
It is. It is.
If you want to go to Mars, cool. Guess what? You're not coming back. You better like it there.
So for the first few missions, it's going to be like that. And but what I do, to your point, I think SpaceX has a tremendous role in the fact that Musk is the first person that has said that we're in the middle of a potential existential crisis here on Earth, right? And so, and if you believe the science or not, again, separate conversation. But global issues around climate and weather and all that stuff, many will argue that there are problems, and if those things don't get solved, we're going to be in a serious situation. So assume for a second, if you agree with that notion for a second, then we're going to need to look for somewhere else to habitate and to sort of live. And Musk is all over in terms of Mars needs to be kind of that place. Now there's probably a ton of other places that now in between now and then we may find that there's another alternative, but SpaceX is going to play a key mission. Now SpaceX as a company still needs to sort of communicate back to Earth. They still need to sort of transport people, with even if it's from Earth to Mars one way or within Mars. They still need to provide all these same services that we're talking about that the Musk companies provide today, whether it's here on Earth or in another planet. And so there's definitely a connection there. Around what's possible. One of the things that you and I talked about the last time when we were talking about brain-computer interfaces is it's about probably one of my favorite subjects, which is the ability for our memories to live on.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the challenges that you'll have in space is that, what happens with all the knowledge and all those people that sort of, that die, and how does knowledge continue, and, how do communities grow? And so, brain-computer interfaces are going to play a key role in ensuring that those early settlers there in space, that their memories and their knowledge and all that stuff won't get lost, right? Especially because the first folks that are going to go there, these are going to be top of the food chain in terms of scientists, et cetera. So you need to ensure.
So are they going to be like the early settlers in America, man? The ones who said, "Hey, man, I had nothing here," or the ones that jump on a boat and try to get you right. That either you're probably going to have two. I don't know. We'll see. But I think mine is that you could have two scenarios there, right? I think. Yeah. First you're gonna have all those the humanoid robots out there building the stuff, doing the scraping, putting up, they're gonna get all that stuff ready, and then at some point you'll have either one or two types of those humans coming out there.
Yeah, and the other situation is that we're not the only ones trying to get there. So is China, which is probably From a robotic standpoint, they're very advanced, right? And they can do things in China that, we can't do here, sometimes because of ethical reasons and sometimes because of legal issues and whatever the situation may be, they are also in that same race. So we're not alone. The European Union is in the same situation. So everybody's trying to get to colonize Mars at some point.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I heard Musk saying, I guess we're what, I think it was 2027-ish is when he thinks he can get out there. Is that roughly what you were,
Yeah,
2026?
2030,
Oh, 2030. So 2030 is
yeah,
when he thinks he can get out. They're going to do some exploratory,
yeah.
kind of make,
Now,
he's going to make some mistakes. Like this is it's a great thing about the culture. You're going to try some things. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to blow up a couple, rockets on the way, but
yeah.
you'll get there, right? And so you're thinking more like 2030 by the time by the time we get it, he gets a rocket up on Mars.
Yeah, now you got to remember that he's very aggressive when it comes to his dates, right? Very bold around the predictions that he makes, and sometimes he's not right about the date that he hits. Sometimes he could be quarters away, or sometimes he's years away, and so this is a big big unknown factor right now. Who knows?
But even 4 years is like nothing. We started Analyst Investors like 5 years ago, and it just it flies, right?
Oh yeah.
And then by the way, in the Boring Company, is the Boring Company just like a redheaded stepchild, or is there anything you see there? Maybe it's with Mars, right? Now with Boring, you can do some interesting thing on Mars. You can
you could
Teslas and stuff. What do you think?
You could, but I think that the first place that the Boring Company is going to really sort of take off is when we as a nation sort of get serious about reinventing transportation. And many years ago, we've been talking about things like Hyperloop and how do you get from New York to LA in hours, right? So sort of through this super fast high speed transportation modes, which are not plane, not regular trains, but sort of the next evolution of that. And instead of getting there by if it takes you 6 hours to get there by plane, maybe it takes you 4 hours to get there through something like Hyperloop, right? A lot of conversation was happening around pilots that they were doing out in the West Coast, around Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Lots of pilots being done in Dubai and United Arab Emirates but I think that got stalled for some reason. I haven't kept up with it enough, but I think that's what the next generation is on sort of reinventing transportation, whether it's in a dense city like DC, for example, or LA, or doing it in rural areas where some of the roads may not be in the best conditions, or things are really far away, and so experimenting there, I think it's really the next thing that we need to do, because Miami, probably one of the worst examples of probably good public transportation, right? So our public transportation is either non-existent or really bad shape, and it shouldn't be. There is no good reason on why. And I know, for example, Miami would be a perfect example for a Boring Company project that would be able to bring it here into the city and be able to sort of improve transportation in a really drastic and sort of significant way. Because putting a train that goes 95, 100 miles an hour is not going to do it, right? I drive that fast probably at times. And so so that train is really not adding much more value in a significant way. But the Boring Company is able to do tunnels, that is able to connect places, and then put in technology there that should be able to improve the way that we transport ourselves.
Well, and it's funny, we're like, hey, man, the Boring Company, I don't know, I think they went on pause, and it's like the guy's got like 7 or 8 trillion-dollar companies. There's one that's kind of, hey, he's maybe a little bit too busy, can't focus on this one. And, it's doing all right. And maybe it's just, kind of on hold, but it's amazing, right? You just got this portfolio, and they're just big and impactful. And then, like you said, kind of tying it all together. Alex, anything else like you want to share, just maybe as you think about this, this convergence, kind of what it means, what leaders out there should be thinking about to help them be successful in this just amazing time of exponential growth? I mean, this is one thing, but you're just seeing just kind of one ecosystem example. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, so probably two things. One is the possibilities, and that we haven't talked a whole lot about, but there's so much potential when a company like a set of companies like Musk's decides that tomorrow they're going to sort of converge in this way, or Apple or Google or whoever, or the next big tech company. But those same possibilities could happen to any other company, any multinational conglomerate that has a number of different properties. But right now, they're not thinking about connecting the dots. So I think that that's probably the number one message, that the possibilities to do that, I would challenge a lot of those executives to kind of rethink, take a look at that stuff, because I think that there's a ton of value that needs to be, put it back into the table and figure out, how do we really leverage this? How do we take advantage? So that's probably the first message. The second one is that there's going to be a tremendous amount of new developments coming out as these things sort of get converged, or just as new technology develops. So, for example, an AI digital twin is one of those things that I'm on the lookout for, because one day I want to replace myself and have, send my AI digital twin to attend a meeting while I spend more time with my family. And today I can't do that. I could do what I would say the most minimum basic layer, which is to try to create an agent and allow me to serve from a productivity standpoint, automate my calendar, my emails, my things. But that's nothing. That's really sort of the most minimal.
Scratching the surface, right?
It is. And so that, for example, is one of those things that becomes very possible very quickly if this convergence happens. And that would be tremendous for us as a society, because then not only from an AI perspective, but also from a from a life perspective, our lives become better, more convenient, where we can sort of manage and spend and make better use of our time when we have these digital twins. And then eventually those digital twins don't have to be virtual; they could become humanoid in nature, etc. So that's probably the second thing. We also spoke about the fact that, how do we ensure that when we die, our memories continue living on? That, I think, is a very powerful concept, and people need to figure out and pay attention to how do we do that, right? And preserving those memories and ensuring that a lot of this knowledge doesn't sort of go to waste. So I would say that that's probably another, and those are just two examples of things that become very possible very quickly as convergence occurs. The last one that I would say then is that this stuff is moving so quickly at such a rapid pace that neither probably me or anyone necessarily can predict what's going to happen in 3 years or 5 years. But what we can do is to sort of start painting the picture, to demonstrate through these examples and through these visions of what's possible, so we can start thinking towards that end in mind, and to start designing our applications, our systems, and the way that organizations think and organize themselves into these areas. Because right now it's theoretical, but you've seen how fast AI has evolved. This stuff could be here around the corner as well. And, we need to be prepared to deal with that. So those would be kind of the three messages that I would leave your audience or your executives with.
Yeah. So, this is why I do this exponential growth podcast, which is powered by Angeles, right? There's just so many things that are happening so fast. We all can't keep up, but we all have different expertise or have different views into some of this area. And it should help us learn about all these trends that are going on, giving us insights there. But also, how do you invest, right? You talk about all these things. Well, guess what? You're kind of laying out a vision of the future, and you say, hey, if this is where the future is going, well, how should I place my investment bets, right? Or where shouldn't I place my investment bets? Whether you're investing as an individual or corporation, making bets, investing capital from your company into certain initiatives, right? And then how do you lead, right? Now you're in a world, you're in a world where you're leading, and you've got, agents that are, replicating, humans and AI and all this, competitive exponential growth. So this is why we do this podcast. And then a couple things that you want to touch on. And we're talking about this in one of my podcasts, and I think I mentioned it again. You said, yeah, when we die, we pass, how do we pass things along, right? I think the question that's coming out, and it was a Wall Street Journal maybe last week, and I think I saw it somewhere again. The question might be if we die, and the amount of change and exponential change in health and the genome and this technology and regeneratives. Oh, actually, it was today. Actually, it was last week. It was there was a hot mic with President Xi and Putin, and they were talking about, I don't know, kind of like, we're gonna leave the 150 or something like that, right? And you say, you see all this regenerative stuff, and then today in the Wall Street Journal, it was about all the tech bros, all these venture capitalists, how they're making all these bets in this, longevity and in the future, and when we die, if we die, but there's a mentality, at least an exponential growth trend, that we think about age kind of linearly, and we've been living like this, and we have some kind of growth in the age, but you're operating on an exponential curve. Crazy things can happen, right? So I don't say, but keep an eye on. I think people should keep an eye on that one and look, and all this stuff in Elon Musk's, ecosystem, right? It will, no matter if our average age is 80 or if it's 180, he's still going to play and he's still going to win.
Yeah. One fascinating area that, again, to just think about in the future that really hasn't developed as fast as it should be is nanotechnology. And that will be a tremendous factor that will help in the development and cure, because with nano, you can target things, right? Very precisely, very, very precisely. And so it is really fascinating. And, thank you again for the time that you've given me today to hear, share some of my thoughts, and let me know how else I can help.
Yeah. So no, thank you, Alex. I know you're busy. You got a lot of stuff going on. Thank you for jumping on, sharing your thoughts. I think we'll follow up in the posts and stuff with a couple of your articles, a couple of my articles around this, maybe in some of these Wall Street Journal articles. And then also, too, for those, I put out a newsletter yesterday that got a lot of good response on just all this exponential growth in sports. Football season kicked off. So you can, on my link, you can see the newsletter. Subscribe to that. We featured Emma Rodriguez Ayala, who's at Ariel Investment. She's a GP in a fund there and doing some great stuff. And Marissa Solis, I think she runs marketing for the NFL. She did some great. The NFL is booming. It's just booming. A lot of great stuff going on. So again, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. Alex, thank you. Let's keep in touch. We'll have you on again. Have a great one, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.